So good afternoon and welcome to the Ultima online event covering the highlights of Vmworld Europe 2021, the VMware annual conference that was held 2 weeks ago now on between the 7th and the 9th of October. As most of you will be aware, this was a fully virtual event, and the first opportunity that a lot of people, including myself, have had to actually attend and experience it firsthand. As I say, three day event. There was a lot of material presented, a lot of seminars, a lot of hands-on labs, and various other things. And what I've tried to do in this session is target towards the audience a little bit. I can see that a lot of you are engaged in the support and the architecture of infrastructure within your companies. So I've purposely targeted the presentation today towards that area. There's a lot of material covered in VMworld that was for other areas such as developers, ISVs, cloud providers, telcos, and so on. Once you eliminate a lot of that, the material, of which there was lots, becomes a little bit simpler to manage. So before we get into it, just a little bit about myself. My name's Nick Farina. I am a senior technical consultant with Ultima. I work every day helping our customers develop solutions, restructure their data centers, particularly those that employ VMware technology. So VMware is a recurring feature of what I do. So I've worked in IT for 25 years, starting out dealing with Microsoft and Citrix technologies, was involved in very early adoption of consumer cloud type provisioning back in the early 2000s with products like Citrix WinFrame and Citrix MetaFrame, providing applications to remote clients, external remote clients, for application service providers. And I've worked in the field of thin computing, server-based computing ever since, of which 10 years of that has been working predominantly with VMware. So I've been with the product through its numerous iterations, from its relative infancy in the late 2000s, early 2010s, with the version 3.5, version 4.1, right up to the version 7 that we have today, and have seen it go from an emerging product used for test dev and a number of low criticality niche workloads to being the platform for production Wintel and Linux workloads across the globe. It's an interesting time for VMware, as you'll see in the presentation. I'll just cover off the format first of all. So my presentation will be just less than an hour, going through the key features of VMworld, certainly the features that I believe will be of most interest to you. VMware strategy for 2022 and beyond. VMware's new cloud offerings and what that means for the type of medium-sized organisations that we deal most with here at Ultima. A little bit about Tanzu. There's been a lot mentioned about Tanzu. I'll just get a show of hands here, if I may. How many of you have heard or read about VMware Tanzu? Just want to get an idea of our starting point on that. So all quite new to it, as was I until about 6 months ago, when I started looking into it, as it was included as part of the vCloud suite with the latest version of VMware. So there'll be a little bit more about that and why it's so important to VMware and why it was such an area of focus in the infrastructure sessions at VMworld. We'll cover a little bit more about Vsphere as it's as used as a specialized hypervisor for other emerging technologies like AI, ML, blockchain is something else that they're very heavily behind, as well as application modernization and containerizations. And then we'll go into the notable projects that were announced, VMware projects that were announced at the event, and just do a quick sum up. And then the last 30 minutes of the event we'll dedicate to what they called at VMworld a fireside chat, where we'll all get a chance to engage and have a question and answer session. We'll also incorporate into that the answers and the follow-up discussions on the questions that you posed over the online registration when you all signed up. So that's it. Without further delay, then let's get into it. So Vmworld Europe 2021. So as I say, this first time it's been a virtual event, so it's opened it up to a lot of people who weren't able to find the time to make a trip overseas before, held between the 7th and the 9th of October 2021. It included speeches by some pretty big names in IT, including Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, Larry Ellison of Oracle, Arvind Krishna of IBM, and several more. And these have all been made available now on VMware's website. We'll share the links to this key content after the event. So the amount of content was formidable. There were over 800 presentations, 200 question and answer fireside chats, and over 100 hands-on labs. So as you can imagine, I was pretty busy trying to cover everything over those 3 days. There was a major focus, as I'm sure none of you will be surprised, on post-pandemic IT challenges and the consequent shift that this has driven towards cloud adoption, and particularly the shift towards multi-cloud. Multi-cloud made up a huge amount of the content at VMworld Europe. VMware are very much seeing the multi-cloud as the future. They're very much driven by what their customers do and what their customers feedback. And the strong feedback is that customers want to be able to make use of multiple clouds as befits each use case. Rather than going lock, stock and barrel into a single cloud provider. And furthermore, when they choose their clouds for their various applications and services, they want the freedom to move between clouds at will as the landscape changes. We'll get a little bit more into that. They set out their development focus for the next 12 months, announcing several key projects. A lot of those were in the area of multi-cloud, but there was also some very exciting stuff for hypervisors and on-prem as well. So this isn't just a cloud session. There's a lot of good stuff they're bringing along for the on-prem IT as well. But of course, all of the technologies that they are introducing now for on-premise are also going to be made available in VMware Cloud as well. And that was very much the ethos of the whole thing, that there aren't going to be separate VMware Cloud and Vsphere silos anymore. It's all going to be one development stream. So what you get for on-prem, you also get for their cloud offerings. VMware Cloud for AWS, VMware Azure Solution, VMware Cloud for OCP, GCP, and so on. And many of the features that we're going to be discussing in the event today are planned for introduction into Vsphere 8.0 in big air quotes there, because we don't know what the product will be called. There's a very good chance that there will be a name change to reflect the integration of the vSphere and the vCloud streams. So we could be getting a new product. We could be getting a new product name. Vsphere has been around as a branding for 10 years now. In fact, over 10 years. And it's probably about time they did a refresh, and I would expect that to likely be the case. But whatever it is, it's going to be coming along in October next year, which coincides with the end of support for the 6 versions of vSphere 6.5 and 6.7. So October next year is going to be a very busy time when it comes to planning for anybody who's running vSphere, particularly those running vSphere 6. So yes, a lot of what they presented was very much driven by the pandemic and the sudden and sometimes extreme IT challenges that it suddenly placed on companies across the globe. One notable example, as I'm sure none of you will be surprised, will be the mass adoption of remote working that was demanded, and rapid decentralization of the IT services that sat behind that. So users were no longer congregated in single office locations. They were distributed across geographical regions. The inability to travel internationally meant that a lot of new international access to systems was required. A lot of peering of data close to where the users were was necessary, and so on. And the vast bulk of this was satisfied through the integration of public cloud, the vast majority of which was SaaS. So Office 365, Teams, so on and so forth, made up the bulk of it. But a lot of platform type services were employed as well, infrastructure type services, cloud files, putting files close to the users, and so on. This was significant as well. the upshot of it is that over 90% of companies are now supporting two IT silos, one on-prem or hosted, or infrastructure as a service, and one in the cloud. And the vast majority of those are running separate management infrastructures for each. And as applications modernize, as a lot of companies have now seen the value of the public cloud in being able to adapt to changing conditions, and 2020 certainly was that, the cloud adoption is accelerating. And the modernization of applications, moving from server-bound applications to containerized applications that are fully portable across multiple clouds, multiple environments, give cloud providers and software developers and software vendors alike access to powerful new features and access to cloud-only services, ML, AI, and so on. So the adoption of cloud over the next 10 years is projected to go exponential, and leave a lot of companies with a management challenge. As you can see in the image here, the complexity of a multiple cloud hybrid environment can quickly escalate. So we come in with multiple clouds, then each of the clouds has to have a DR environment, and then we have some applications that need to remain on-premise because they need to remain low latency, or they have specific infrastructure requirements. We have all the SaaS end user type applications to integrate now. We have cloud-based VDI to integrate, and all of that needs disaster recovery infrastructure as well. So you end up with this expanding exponential grid of management silos without one clear tool to rule them all. And so one cloud can clearly never meet all requirements. What's good for running a VDI system or running your office suite isn't necessarily the best cloud for developing your modern applications or for running business critical databases. So it's no surprise that 75% of companies now have data and or services in 2 or more clouds, and over 40% are using 3 clouds or more. So there's a key statistic announced at VMworld there. It gives you some idea that multi-cloud, the use of multi-cloud is growing. So as companies use more clouds, monitoring and security across them will become much more difficult. Each cloud provider has its own tool set. It requires training of staff on all the different tool sets. You then have to maintain those. You have to maintain those skills, which is not easy in the UK's expensive and sometimes scarce labour market. To maintain skills across multiple cloud management infrastructures, getting somebody who's a guru at GCP, AWS, and Azure, you have to get pretty lucky. And even over time, these skills might atrophy, and you'll get attrition as well. So maintaining an effective support infrastructure across multiple clouds is difficult. And so we get to this whole idea of VMware as an infrastructure management company. This is an important concept to grasp, because in a way they always have been. The ESXi product is free. where they make all the money is on vCloud and Vsphere vCenter server, and that has always been the case. The hypervisor has always been a free product, and it's the management that companies get value from and pay for. And with the announcements made at VMworld 2021, that's very much going to continue. But instead of these hypervisors just being free software running on tin, this is now going to be cloud offerings as well. But just extending vSphere across multiple clouds is not enough. Supporting infrastructure on cloud is very different to supporting it on purchased or rented or leased tin. Optimization becomes much more important. Right-sizing VMs, right-sizing services, ensuring that VMs and services no longer being used are switched off and so on, because as well as managing all of the traditional parameters of CPU, RAM, storage and so on, we're also managing money, hard cash. So that level of optimization and control is in a cloud environment is paramount. And this is where they hope to leverage their existing investment in the vRealize suite and the technologies that came along with that to drive greater optimization in cloud. This is just a quick slide. I've used it before, but it illustrates the massive shift to cloud in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. As we said, and not unsurprisingly, a large part of that was a move to SaaS, Office 365, and so on. As the workforce became more distributed, it was a natural fit. But a lot of adoption of public cloud infrastructure services there as well. And meanwhile, the investments in on-premise software, servers and data centers, unsurprisingly, fell. So VMware's share of the world's hypervisors is shrinking. So from 76% in 2013 to just 27% today, which again will be a surprise to no one, as so many services have been moved to cloud. So cloud providers now account for 54%, going by a recent Gartner survey of all hypervisor workloads. But bear in mind, that's not just cloud-based VMs, that's the VMs that sit behind platform and SaaS services as well. So this is a total of hypervisors globally. Many SaaS providers and software vendors are planning to modernize their apps, something that many of you are no doubt seeing already, moving them from VM-based, OS-based to container-based. And there's been a lot of talk about Kubernetes and the management infrastructure necessary to support that. Any end users that want infrastructure level control of these will be needing to manage container clusters, for which Kubernetes is the emerging standard. There is, of course, the chance that a lot of applications are going to go SaaS. But there will always be applications where end users want to retain control over resources these applications are consuming. At the end of the day, if SaaS was the best solution for everything, we'd already be doing it. So as these applications transition from running on your VMs, on your on-premise ESXi servers, as they do at the moment, to going to container level cloud native applications, a lot of organizations, probably including your own, are going to want to maintain that control and visibility that they have on those applications, at least to the same level that you have at the moment. And there is, of course, some VM-based applications that won't be developed for cloud native. They will remain VM-based, and we're going to be supporting those for some time to come. There are some types of applications that require direct access to hardware, GPU virtualization, AI, ML, blockchain, and so on, which will always need to remain on a VM in order to get those direct hardware interfaces to drive maximum performance. Those will remain VM based as well. So we're going to end up in a situation where the apps are distributed across both containers and across VMs, and once again we'll have a management challenge there, having a consistent environment for everyone. So what does this look like? What does the path to cloud look like? Well, we've got the current situation on the left for many of us, where we've got some of our apps running on VMs on an on-premise VMware server cluster, potentially multi-site with resilience and so on and so forth, the type of systems that we've been supporting for years. Then we have our emerging cloud-based applications, which for the majority of us will be SaaS. We're just letting the providers look after this, but in the background, this is all container based, running on Kubernetes groups, a lot of it already. It's just that internal IT teams aren't having to worry about that. But we've already got two management silos in place. The fact that one of them might be outsourced, it's still there. And then as applications are modernized, we have more container-based applications in the cloud. The need to manage them becomes greater as a larger amount of the company's data and services goes cloud-based. The risk involved in SaaSing the lot of it becomes higher, and is not going to be the route that a lot of companies want to take. And then we have anything that still needs to stay on VMs, legacy apps with specific hypervisor requirements and so on, that would need to be then migrated into public cloud native VMs. And if we want a single management infrastructure for everything, we have to pick a single cloud, put everything together with the same provider, and hope that they don't jack their prices up too much, because if they do, the job of moving some or all services to a different provider is formidable. There's no portability between different clouds, as you would expect. The source cloud provider in any migration is going to make it as difficult as possible to move services and VMs away from their environment and onto somebody else's. So you don't have a very portable, fluid environment here, but it does achieve integration to the cloud. VMware's way says that, well, let's do this. Well, we've still got the same starting point, VMs, applications, containers, but let's throw a single management plane around everything, consisting of Vsphere and vCloud, which are going to become one product. VMware Tanzu, which is the interface effectively between VMware and Kubernetes, and Kubernetes itself for managing the containers, which still continues to present all of the familiar Kubernetes interfaces to developers and so on, and will be compatible with whatever software vendor you have. But you have a single management infrastructure that sits on top of that for both your cloud-based modern applications and your on-premise legacy apps. At such time that you're then ready to make the move to the cloud, instead of going to the cloud native VMs for your legacy and high performance workloads, you would locate them on VMware vCloud on your chosen cloud provider, and that will be a consistent environment across all providers. So you can migrate at will any number of VMs live if you want to between different cloud providers. So you can make sure that everything is running in the cloud where you are driving maximum value and maximum performance for your outlay. And you have a single management suite that looks after the lot: vCloud, vSphere, Tanzu, and the vRealize suite as well. So one management infrastructure to rule them all, and a fully portable VM hosting environment across multiple clouds. So this is basically the core of VMware's direction for 2022 and beyond. Of course, in this environment, if you wish to continue running on-premise environments, you can do. Those can form part of the integrated environment across multiple vCenter servers, multiple versions, multiple different companies. It all becomes API driven. So gone are the days where you need to use things like link mode, enhanced link mode, version dependent links between vCenters, shared SSOs. All of that goes away. So anything can be interfaced to anything else and form part of your hybrid cloud of VMware. So you can have bits in Azure, bits in AWS, bits in on-premise data centers all over the world. You acquire another company, they have a VMware environment already that can be integrated into your management scope very, very easily. So a single management interface to run everything, and because it's a single management interface, it presents a single API as well. So all of your integration, all of your monitoring, all of your security scanning, and your backup and DR solution, compliance solutions that interface with vCenter will work across the entire estate, regardless of where the individual components are located. So is VMware the only multi-cloud management platform out there? Well, no, there are other tools like Turbonomic, who I wouldn't be surprised if VMware bought them at some point, Flexera and others. And there's some very promising open source tools out there for managing multi clouds as well. So VMware is going to be one of a number of options for doing this, but it's going to be quite a compelling option for companies who are using VMware already, since it will be an interface, a vendor, a way of doing things that they are already familiar with. So there'll be less need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So this is very much what VMware are basing their future on. But as I say, there's been some exciting developments in the on-prem world as well, which we'll come over to. So there's an elephant in the room here, and we'll confront it. What does VMware Cloud actually cost? So I did some calculations on this, and the costs per VM actually work out to be very much comparable to what it costs to run a VM natively in the two largest cloud providers here. That was a surprise. I thought it was going to come out a lot more expensive, but it's really close, really close. And considering the portability that you get by going on a VMware platform in the cloud rather than native, it's going to be a compelling option for many. So putting a VM in EC2 with 8 gigs of RAM, 4 vCPUs is about 700 and something per year. If we take a pair of resilient hosts in VMware Cloud for AWS and fully utilize those with 4 vCPU, 8 gig of RAM VMs, and we make good use of the hardware, and we're all fully optimized and we're all fully right-sized, and VMware are providing a lot of tools to help us do that, then the costs come quite close and become justifiable. Anyone who's interested in seeing the workings out that went behind these figures, I can provide that as a handout after the presentation. So the implementation is here. This is how it actually hangs together from a functional point of view. I won't go through it in huge detail. They certainly did at VMworld and drilled into all these areas and how they interacted. But the upshot is that your modernized applications can be running on native containers on whatever cloud platform you like. Anything that has a Kubernetes interface can be integrated and can be managed through Tanzu and ultimately your VMware front end. And that then integrates with services, software-defined data center services, VMs, vSANs, NSX, network regions across both on-premise, customer managed infrastructure, private cloud, and the VMware cloud offerings. Meanwhile, developers continue to interface with Kubernetes, with Docker and so on, using the tools that they're already familiar with. They don't need to retrain on any VMware software. They continue doing what they're already doing. So this isn't something that you need buy-in from your software vendors or your developers. They're unaffected. This is purely with regard to mission control, as VMware put it. Actually looking after the reliability and the cost effectiveness of the environment. So this is another diagram that shows that. So we have the VMware clouds, multiple VMware clouds. These can be multiple vCenters in different locations, on different versions, in different subsidiaries, different countries, plus VMware cloud on AWS, Azure cloud, and so on, that all have a centralized management infrastructure looking after them, with disaster recovery, ERP, all your applications that are free to run on any part of this system as the business dictates. And this is another view again of the same thing. So application support using Tanzu. This is the integration with Kubernetes. Cloud infrastructure, VMware Cloud across all of these cloud providers, with more being added soon. Cloud management with vRealize Cloud. So this is your monitoring. This is your ongoing right sizing, and optimization. Security and networking, NSX, and all the exciting new services that hang off of that, and your workspace services as well. Workspace 1, which is the new name for AirWatch, and the VMware Edge technologies, all spanning that. So some of the projects that were announced, some of these are cloud-based, some of these are on-prem based. A lot of them were quite interesting. The Project Cascade was a headliner. This is the integration of the numerous VMware products to create the single hybrid cloud management suite that we just talked about. So we're going to see a lot of integration between the various different products. VMDSC and HCX we'll cover in a bit of detail in a later slide. Project Ensemble is basically the same thing again, but done for vRealize. So vRealize, rather than this being two silos, one for cloud and one for on-prem, you now have one instance of vRealize that looks after everything. Again, all API driven. You can integrate multiple on-prem vCenter installations in any accessible location on the globe, as well as all your implementations of VMware in the cloud. You have both cloud-centric and application-centric views here, so you can bound your applications however you like. These applications can be located in multiple data centers across the globe and in multiple clouds as well, but you can see the application in its infrastructure at a glance. So some significant enhancements to the vRealize interface are coming down the pipe. This is very much a pre-release screen that we're looking at here. This is not something that we have in vRealize today. So the new version being released next year, it's going to have a lot more integration in it. Project Arctic makes hybrid cloud the default operating model. So as we discussed, vSphere and vCloud as separate products are going away. They're going to become one integrated suite. Your management server, your vCenter server, won't just be able to manage the hosts on premise anymore. It will be able to manage anything it can get an API connection with, including cloud environments, other vCenter environments, and so on. So this whole need for link mode, enhanced link mode, all goes away. It all becomes API based. And Project Arctic also includes a massive expansion of the reach of VMware Cloud in 2022. This is very much a good thing as we get more providers on board with VMware Cloud. The competition is sure to drive costs down further, as well as driving new and exciting options. At the moment, the range of hosts available are fairly limited, but good for most applications. They're 36 core hosts with 512 gigabytes of RAM each. It's bare metal. You're not sharing it with anyone. But as time goes on, there's going to be newer, more powerful servers available under VMware Cloud to handle your more demanding workloads, DB servers, AI, ML, blockchain, and very large container services and more. Headliners were Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud, OVH, Alibaba, as well as AWS, of course, but a lot more are going to be coming online. In terms of the hypervisor technologies, there were a couple of very interesting new bits of tech coming along. One called Project Monterey, the other one called Project Capitola. Project Monterey is possibly the most significant development in server interfacing since Converged came along 10 or so years ago. So in the same way that converged NICs virtualized out network connectivity, a new breed of smart NICs are coming along, which actually virtualize and offload SDDC functions. So any virtualized networking, NSX, will run on the NIC now, relieving a huge amount of burden on the CPU and releasing that back to applications. So all of the processing that the CPU currently does in an NSXT environment, any NSX environment, the packets come in, they have to be dealt with by an appliance which is running multi-threaded on the main CPU, as you know, and of course those instructions have to queue up on the CPU with instructions from your application, and this is debarred for many the use of NSX as a networking platform for very high performance applications, simply because this queuing goes on, it introduces latency, and for a lot of applications like video processing being the first one that comes to mind, but there are many more, the delay that introduces means that hyperconverging the networking isn't an option. We also have the DPUs coming in as well. Now, DPUs do for SDDC, software defined data center, basically what graphics cards did for graphics. So it takes everything, all of your NSX, all of your vSAN off of the CPU completely. And it's being touted as a data center on a chip. And rather than being based on traditional multi-core CPU infrastructure, these are based on programmable ASICs, very low latency programmable silicon, very similar to what you see in dedicated LAN switches today. So servers will be able to switch VXLAN and Geneve used by NSX as fast as what switches can switch Ethernet today. And what this will move us towards is effectively you can have one box that does everything. So it has a CPU, it has a DPU, it has network interfaces on the back, it has interfaces for storage. And you get to decide whether that box is a server, whether it's a switch, whether it's a router, whether it's a firewall, whether it's a head for a storage system, and it will perform as well as the dedicated devices do today. So all access to networking and all access to storage is going to go fully scale out effectively using an ubiquitous single box equipped with CPUs and DPUs that does everything. And because it's ASIC based, it's fully programmable. Security is baked right in, and because it's running on an ASIC rather than the CPU, it is much less susceptible to compromise. A CPU, by its very nature, can run variable code, and obviously sometimes that code can contain malware. This locks all those networking and storage functions away in a separate piece of device, in a separate device. So it's a very exciting development, and VMware are on board on the ground floor on this one. So the Intel Bluefield 2 DPU pictured here is the world's first dedicated SDDC DPU, and VMware are already writing in support for it. So its implementation is something similar to this. So you see the current solution for, and this is NSX here. We have VMs, containers, vApps all running on the hypervisor, and then we have the hypervisor layer ESXi sitting underneath it, incorporating NSX functions. So everything coming through the VMs, everything coming through the ESXi kernel, everything coming through NSX, all has to be queued up and processed on the CPUs. In the new world, we have our VMs here, but ESXi acts as a pure hypervisor once more, with NSX being offloaded onto the NIC. So a packet comes in, the NIC already knows what VXLAN that needs to go to, what network routing, filtering and firewall rules apply to it, and it goes off on its way. So this is like unhitching a caravan from the back of your ESXi environment when you're using virtualized networking. And again, this is something that's going to be available on-prem and in the cloud eventually. So very exciting. This looks at the DPU scenario where we have NSX and vSAN offloaded to an SDDC device, as well as host management. So again, the hypervisor itself, the CPU, only needs to burden itself with running your applications. So there's an isolation layer between them, as well as improving performance. This is great for security as well. Project Capitola, this is a good one because this solves a problem that I've seen a lot out in the field. So with Project Capitola, VMware are introducing memory virtualization. So they are doing for RAM what vSAN did for storage. So a single VM can now use, or will be able to use, memory from multiple hosts, provided they are, of course, connected together with a suitable high bandwidth network link. So VMware have bought out Mellanox, and they are using their RDMA technology, RDMA and RDMA over Ethernet technology, to be able to create VMware clusters with fully pooled RAM capabilities. So that means that if you've got a bunch of 512 gig hosts, as you would have in vCloud, and as many of you have already running on-prem, and you want to come in and run a 1 terabyte VM, no problem. You deploy it, and it will run on the host, and it will grab memory from other hosts as it needs it, and it will tier that memory intelligently as well. So it will carry out full tiering across the cluster. So the most frequently accessed memory pages will be placed in local DRAM. Pages that are accessed less frequently can be tiered out to lower performance memory technologies such as PMEM, Intel Optane, and the like, or even NVMe. And then out to DRAM, NVMe and PMEM in other servers as well, and all of this will be managed as a trickle down cache. So it all happens with little to no loss of performance. So the implications of this for being able to provide large in-memory databases on existing and new and cloud clusters has significantly increased. So we're not going to be reliant. We're not going to be reliant on expensive scale up on individual hosts, having to junk expensive DIMMs in favor of even more expensive DIMM. And if you take into account that RAM can make up 50 to 80% of a server's cost, you can wonder at the cost savings that will be available there by using this technology correctly. Also, PMEM comes in much higher capacities than what's available with DRAM currently. You can get 512 gig PMEM modules already, and 1 terabyte modules are coming soon. That's individual modules, and you multiply that up by the number of slots in a server. That equates to some pretty large in-memory sets you can be working on. If NVMe is integrated, you've got up to 2 terabytes per device to play with there. So the potential for providing very large memory sets is almost unlimited with Project Capitola. But the best thing about it is that because your fast RAM is being deburdened of having to do reads and writes and refreshes for infrequently accessed data, since that is now tiered out either to other servers or to a different capacity of memory like Optane or NVMe, it is more focused on servicing the read-write requests for the frequently accessed data. So you get a useful performance boost as well. In tests, and this raised a few eyebrows at VMworld, it yielded a 30% memory throughput gain for SQL Server just by turning on memory tiering with no other changes to the server or the configuration, just by introducing the tiering out of less frequently accessed data to lower tiers. So it's similar to what we see today with storage devices that tier to SSD and NVMe and so on. We now get those kind of throughput boosts with memory as well. And again, if you're working with very time critical, very sensitive applications, this can be a boost in throughput that's well worth having. DSC, VM desired state configuration. This is a piece of functionality that's available now as a fling, but is going to be integrated into Vsphere in the next version. So administrators can now set the desired state of a VM, and that state will take effect next time the VM is rebooted. So what that means is if you've got a VM that you've grown from 4 vCPUs to 8 vCPUs because the system was particularly busy, maybe due to a change in working patterns or an application being tested or a seasonal increase, whatever, and you need to resize it back down, at the moment, the virtualization support team need to coordinate with the application support team. A downtime window needs to be negotiated, a change needs to be written, the VM needs to be shut down with all the parties present, resized, brought back up, and that's all done off cycle. With VMDSC, you would go in and set the VM to 4 vCPUs, and it will automatically change from 8 to 4 vCPUs the next time it reboots, regardless of what the cause of that reboot is: patching, routine maintenance, and so on. So it saves us having to have that additional reboot and that additional organizational overhead of making the resize, and it gets around all this inertia we have around right sizing VMs at the moment, and all of the resource wastage that causes. And we've already established that resource wastage, particularly in the cloud world, is a very bad thing for cost. So having this feature coming into VMware is going to be of huge value. I don't know if any of you have done VMware optimization assessments with Ultima or anyone else over the last couple of years. I'm sure many of you have, and the amount of incorrectly sized VMs that finds. This can actually be made an automatic process, and you can define the scope of that. So if you want to enable it only on test dev and other environments where end users deploy their own VMs, you can. And it can even be driven automatically from vRealize operations. So vRealize can periodically look at all your VMs and make its own recommendations for how much RAM and how many vCPUs it should have based on usage. And it can apply recommendations if you want it to automatically or after screening from an administrator, and that will then get queued up on VMDSC, and that will take effect the next time each VM restarts, again, Patch Tuesday or whenever, or on a monthly schedule, or whenever that happens. So it just makes right sizing easier. HCX, the hybrid cloud extension, very going to become very important. This is the new vMotion, effectively. So it's fully cross environment, fully cross version, fully cross cloud, API based, live migration or cloning of VMs between any host and any other host that you have access to. It's as simple as that. You deploy an appliance to your source environment and your target environment. The two appliances exchange data and communicate with the vCenter on their site. It can be used for mass migration of thousands of VMs if you want it to. And it also has a DR feature on it as well, where it can take periodic copies of some of your VMs and place them in VMware, on a VMware cloud host or a VMware host on another site. This will be replacing VMware replication as well, eventually, with one tool that fulfills all of your cross-site and cross-cloud migration or cloning of VMs. And it's planned for integration into the main Vsphere product in 2022. I did the hands-on lab for this. It's an extremely impressive product, very smooth, very easy to use. Queues up VM migrations, doesn't overtax the hardware. We did a live migration of a VM from an on-premise server to a VMware cloud server in Oracle Cloud, and this thing only dropped one ping, going from one to the other, and it doesn't require NSX or SDDC to be extended across the sites either, as long as your source and target LANs are compatible. Then everything just works. In fact, there's no real noticeable difference from an HCX migration to what there is a vMotion today, other than the tool being used to initiate it. And even that will probably get flattened out in the next vSphere version. So, I mean, the applications of this are endless. It can be used for migrations from one data center to another. It can be used for migrations from data center to cloud. It can be used to shift VMs from one cloud to the other. Remember earlier on we spoke about one cloud not being maybe fit for all purposes. You may want the freedom to shift VMs around between clouds. For instance, if there's a cost saving of doing so, or you have features or data in a particular cloud that those VMs need to have peered access to, this is as easy now as doing a vMotion. It can also be used for upgrades and replatforming. So when the time comes to go from Vsphere 7 to Vsphere 8, HCX will be the universal migration tool. So there won't be any messing around with carrier hosts that we need to do to move VMs between different versions at present. Every version going forward of VMware is going to be HCX compatible. So HCX will be the universal tool for upgrade and replatforming. You can do all sorts of clever stuff here. So if you've got a data center move to carry out, you can do the data center move now in 2 steps. So you can send all your VMs to the cloud, then you can shut down all your servers, put them in a truck, send them to the new data center, bring the servers back up at your new data center, turn them on, test them out, and then migrate all of your VMs back, and your VMs are live for the whole thing. And on the cloud servers, you've only paid for the hours that you've used while your servers were in transition. So the amount of use cases for HCX are endless, and I'm sure you guys will be able to think of a lot more. Rebalancing across clouds, and then there's the cloning business continuity functionality as well, which is now cloud independent, so it can go across on-premise, private clouds, and public clouds as well. Can be used for proactive disaster avoidance. So if it's a disaster that you can see coming, you can use HCX to quickly move your workloads out to a cloud or another site, so that they're not impacted by the disaster. And obviously it can do DR cloning as well. I could actually do a whole hour just on HCX if I wanted to. I'm going to be putting out a blog on this very soon, so do continue to check back the Ultima website. So a few factors for Vsphere customers to watch out for in the coming 12 months. We've got the Vsphere 6.5 and 6.7, so ESXi vCenter, end of general support coming on the 15th of October next year. That should say 2022, my apologies. So any of you that are running the 6 versions of Vsphere are probably going to want to start planning the move to 7 at some point in the next 12 months. I'm sure you're all fully aware of this. There have been some major changes made to DRS and affinity rules in version 7.0, update 1 and above. So in Vsphere 6 and the first revision of Vsphere 7, DRS was dependent on vCenter. So the hosts would share their telemetry with vCenter. vCenter would then tell the host to move the VMs to the most to the host with the most resources available. And this was a weakness in Vsphere, because it meant that that DRS and the correct balancing of the cluster and the maintenance of these affinity rules, which are required for high availability for a lot of applications, were dependent on vCenter. So if vCenter was down for any reason, you would lose that functionality. To get around that problem, VMware now deploys some little VM appliances to a number of the hosts in the cluster in a redundant fashion, and those now look after DRS. So when you migrate to version 7, you'll see these VCLS VMs suddenly popping up in your environment. And there are some special considerations for handling them, which I'll link you to at the end of the session, follow-up email. Vsphere Enterprise Edition, which I see quite a lot out in the field. This has now been retired. So other than the Essentials versions, now all we've got is Standard and Enterprise, and it goes straight up to Enterprise Plus. So firstly, and most importantly, if you need to add any new hosts to your environment and you're running Enterprise Edition, in order for them to have the same feature set as what your current hosts do, the new hosts need to be Enterprise Plus. But there's a bigger concern here, because Enterprise Edition and its feature set is only honoured for renewals, provided you maintain current VMware support. So if you're using Enterprise Edition, it's very important that you keep your VMware support current, because if you go out of support and you're not able to catch up, you now have to rebuy the licenses on Enterprise Plus rather than Enterprise, which, as you can imagine, could get quite expensive. So anybody who's using Enterprise Edition licenses, please keep up the VMware support on those. Provided you keep up the support on them, Enterprise Edition's feature set will be maintained into 7.0 and beyond. And the use of SD card USB boot media. I know a couple of you asked about this. This is indeed being deprecated in Vsphere 7 Update 3. So if you're using it in Vsphere 7 Update 3, you will get a warning on boot that it's not going to be supported in future releases. You'll still be able to use an SD card or an SD RAID 1 boot device or a USB device to boot an ESXi host in 7.0 Update 3, but you won't be able to in the subsequent version 8 or whatever it is coming out next year. So anyone who's using this type of media just needs to have some planning in place as to what they're going to replace it with when the time comes to upgrade to versions beyond 7. But as long as you remain on version 7, it will still be supported. Now, there are some very good reasons why this is being done, but it basically, there's been a re-architecture of the way that ESXi organizes its partitions now. So whereas before, I think you had less than 4 gigs that was subject to rapid reads and writes, now you've got up to 128 gigs that's being written to, and SD cards and USB devices, which basically have SD card type chips in them, do wear out after lots of rapid writes and can become unreliable. And because even in a RAID 1 setup, your writes are being duplicated across both cards, the RAID 1 doesn't protect you, because both cards are wearing out at the same rate and are likely to fail, if not at the same time, in very quick succession. So VMware are encouraging customers to look at more resilient types of boot media, and that will be mandated from the next major version onwards. So there's various different options available. The boot cards, most of the major server manufacturers, HP, Dell, IBM, and so on, Lenovo, they're all offering boot cards now that are PCI Express based, with M2 SSDs on them that have much greater write resilience than the SD cards did. But there's other options available like SAM boot, or using some of your drive bays, if you have them, to run a pair of hard drives or SSDs to boot from instead. If your server doesn't have any available drive bays, some servers do have remount drive kits available now for this specific purpose to overcome that. Or we could just implement one of these PCI Express boot cards. So it'll be a non-problem with the next generation of servers, since these will likely come with M2 slots on the motherboard, negating the need for a PCI Express card in the first place. The VMware release about the SD cards, again, I'll link to after this session. And that concludes the presentation. So we've got 10 minutes for questions and answers. So I will open up the floor. Let's have a look and see if anything's been asked in the chat. No, not as yet. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you have the floor. Please feel free to ask any questions. So I'll come in. I'll come in here with answers to some of the questions that were posed on the registration form. So the first one that we had: why continue to use VMware in today's cloud world? Obviously, this was a very pertinent question at Vmworld, and the simple answer to it is that VMware, their Vsphere product is going to evolve to become a multi-cloud management platform. But to a degree, that is going to be dependent on the adoption of the VMware cloud services, so the ESXi hosted ESXi hypervisors in cloud. So VMware is very much in the cloud, but whether it will get the adoption rates versus the native infrastructure as a service offering of the cloud providers is anybody's guess at the moment. But as we've seen on cost, it is comparable, and it does offer a lot of freedom that going cloud native doesn't. So they're very much staking their claim in the cloud world. So I think we're going to see them around for a good time to come, as companies want to continue to support their on-prem VMs and their cloud-based VMs with a single pane of glass. Next question we have: what is VMware doing in regards of advancing the UN Global Compact 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Now, they joined up to this program. I had to Google this one, but they joined up to this program in 2019. And a lot of what they're doing with Project Monterey is aimed at reducing CPU cycles in software-defined data center environments. That's just one example of where they're baking increased energy efficiency into their hypervisor management offerings. In addition to that, all the stuff that we saw on right-sizing and minimizing resource waste are also hugely positive developments towards the energy saving goals of the program. There's a number more things that they're doing. The sections on energy efficiency, I must admit I didn't attend all of them, but I can share a bit of extra information about it after the session. SD cards for ESXi 7 and onwards, we've just covered that one off. Finally, what does the future hold for systems that can't use cloud or hybrid systems? VMware are seeing on-prem IT as something that's going to be around for a little time to come. A lot of this is being driven not by inertia, but by regulatory and location requirements for data. There are a lot of applications, telco applications, defense applications, where data, VMs, applications need to be hosted in specific locations and can't go into the cloud. And they're actually making developments there, such as AWS outposts, VMware Cloud for AWS outposts, where a VMware Cloud environment can actually extend itself back the other way and into on-prem. So in order to fulfill regulatory requirements like that. So on-prem is going to be around for a little while to come yet. And VMware intend to fully support it. All right, well, that concludes the setup, the summary of VMworld 2021. I hope you found today's virtual event and presentation informative. If you think up any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to us. And if you'd like to find out any more about some of the technologies that have been presented today, please reach out to your Ultima account manager and we'll get a call fixed up. So we'll wrap up there. I wish you all a very happy remainder of the day and a great evening. Thank you very much.